while since I feel like we've had a true blue Lego Harry Potter remake, and 2023 certainly gave us one of them. In fact, that was the whole intention in the first place, as Lego Harry Potter designer George Gilliat literally just wanted to make a set that he really wanted so badly as a kid and never got into his own type of playset. So firstly, thank you very much, George. It wasn't just you that really wanted to have a remade version of this. As today we'll be comparing the two Black Lake Triwizard Tournament second task sets. Firstly, we have set 4762, the Rescue From The Merpeople, and then we also have set 76420, which is the Triwizard Tournament, the Black Lake. And these sets share a range of similarities, firstly being the set numbers are incredibly similar. Then there's also similarities in terms of price, even regarding inflation, as well as piece counts, let alone the minifigures and just overall set designs in general. Which, speaking of price point, the best thing about the newer version of the set is that it retained that smaller scale and didn't go overboard, making it super big and super expensive, and that is honestly one of my favorite aspects about this set. The newer model is going to set you back $45 US, which really isn't that bad, I guess, when you consider the aftermarket value of the original, which can be upwards of $200 US these days. It is crazy, especially when it only retailed for $20 initially when it came out. Which sounds really cheap, however, when you adjust it for inflation, the set would be valued at $31, which does feel a little bit expensive, but again, I'm really glad that both of these sets retain that same similar scale and price point overall. Now, one aspect that might have affected this, of course, is the piece count, with the original only having 175 pieces. And you can tell when you build it just because of how many large elements there are, but also that was really the standard at the time, whereas these days, while we have more pieces, specifically with this set at 349, again, you can tell there's just a lot more smaller pieces being used these days in Lego sets. There are so many little 1x1 pieces, and also just a lot of greenery and plants, and overall, especially when it comes to the archways, a lot more smaller pieces. That being said, unlike a lot of modern Lego sets, I really don't think that these smaller pieces were used just for the sake of having smaller pieces, which can sometimes often happen. Specifically, I find with Lego Star Wars remakes, every single piece did feel like it served a proper purpose and really, I guess, like was the appropriate piece to use when it comes to this set, which is something that I really liked when building. As I go through the sets, I'm going to pick each different aspect apart and telling you which of the two that I prefer, though honestly, I have to tell you straight off the bat, I think that this newer version did exactly what I want a remake to do, and that is take the original source material, keep it still relatively similar, but improve on it significantly, and that definitely happened here, which makes me really happy. However, like most things, it is not perfect, and there are still a lot of aspects that I actually think the original did end up doing better, which for me at least, mostly all revolved around creative decisions when it came to the minifigures. Both of these sets come with 5 minifigures, which I really feel like for the price point is very reasonable, and honestly, to some extent as well, pretty generous, which I guess is why there are some problems, especially with the newer minifigures. However, I think as a whole, the older set really balanced minifigure detailing as well as set size a lot better. First up is Harry Potter in his second task outfit. The biggest difference between these two, obviously, is the size of the legs, with the newer minifigure using those mid legs that were introduced initially with the 2018 CMF series, which make him significantly shorter than his original counterpart. Another big difference is his long shaggy hair, which is very accurate, I think, to the Goblet of Fire type of hairstyles that we had going on. Now that the movie had released as well and the sets aren't being developed off concept art, Harry's outfit also does look a little bit better with more accurate colors and swapping out that dark blue for black. However, I think the design and scaling of the jersey on the original was a lot better done. There's a lot more detail, which makes sense given that this set was released in a time where Lego was designing things to be very hyper-realistic, almost that it was a little bit uncanny, which you will see later. But specifically, I think the torso had a lot of things that this newer one doesn't. Firstly, the Hogwarts crest looks really small and is really hard to make out on the newer one, as well as the Potter on the back. Personally, I just like the larger letters a bit better. When it comes to Harry's face, the original had one that was a plain sort of Harry face, and then the other side had the gills, whereas the newer one has 2 gilled faces, and also those gills are a lot more simplified, whereas the original had a lot more intricate dealing when it came to the fins on his face. While the newer Harry has some significant upgrades as well as some appropriate flesh-toned flippers, the original Harry Potter works so much better in my opinion, from the Speedo outfit to the printing and detailing. I just think that he was a little bit more refined than this newer version, which is really unfortunate given that he is the main character. Next up, I want to talk about Ron and Hermione, which is really where you can see that hyper-realism printing come to play. Their faces on the original minifigures look so creepy. I remember having these faces in my first ever Lego Harry Potter set, and I really didn't like them. I didn't think that it represented the characters at all, and the same deal goes here. I mean, these are just really, really creepy, and the newer versions are a much better upgrade. While they have that more minimalistic, cartoony style that Lego has been doing the last couple of years, it works really, really well in this set. The sleeping faces look a lot more natural. Their haircuts also are a significant upgrade. Not to mention the robe printing actually being robes instead of just a regular Gryffindor jumper. Overall, the newer set nailed this one absolutely. Victor Crumb is another minifigure that I feel like was better done in the original. Firstly, the newer one really could have done with some dual molded leg printing to represent his board shorts, because again, I think the Speedos are a much more accurate and better looking rendition of the swimwear. Also, I have a really soft spot for the shark head. I personally just think it looks really, really good and really solid, and while the newer one is more color accurate, it has printed eyes, it doesn't just have like indented marks. I really don't think it suits him that well when you look at the older minifigures side by side. Shark head aside though, Victor Crumb again has the same torso problems that Harry has, with everything being a lot more simplified. Just the Strung logo on the newer torso when looking at it against the original is so much weaker. It is really unfortunate, especially given how intricate and beautiful that original torso design was, and just to not see that replicated on the newer version at all is really upsetting. We did, I guess, get some tank top prints in return and a back print, but I really don't think that it was worth it given the sacrifices we made on the torso. And lastly, we have the mermaids, who are equally as creepy as one another. I mean, the newer one again is just so much more accurate to the source material, which I get it. The original was made off concept art. Of course, she's gonna look a little bit creepy and have red hair, but I mean, she does have printing on the tail, which is really nice for a set from 2005, but this newer one, I mean, she's fantastic. You can't deny. Now, when I say these sets are incredibly similar, I really do mean it. I mean, they even both come with these tiny little boat builds that I really don't think added much to the set, nor did they ever need to be included, but the fact that the remake also came with a tiny boat is really, really cool to me. I mean, I don't think either of these actually float, so I don't know what their purpose is, especially in the original, given that the entire scene does take place underwater. Like, there is no surface level in this model at all. I guess for the newer version it kind of does make sense, since we do have the water tower itself within the Black Lake, but again, like, this just sits on the table, it's sinking underwater. I don't know what their purpose is, but it is a real callback to the original set, which personally I really like. Which, speaking of surface level, that is the real big difference between these two sets, as the newer one doesn't just take the ocean floor for what it is, we've brought it up a little bit and made the entire tower, which resulted in a couple of things. Firstly, it added a lot more height to the model, which personally I really enjoy. Don't get me wrong, it's really nice to have a small and concise set, but I really like the length and width of this tower overall. It's nice and tall and skinny, but it can still fit really nicely on a shelf. And the second thing it did is add a lot more space for your characters to stand, as well as add a couple more play features, which, while I guess you're not really going to use all too often, are definitely fun gimmicks to play around with as you're building the set or once you're done with the set. And given that these builds are from two completely different eras, the fact that they are so similar from the pieces used down to the composition of the set overall is really, really, really nice. And you can tell that there was a fan of Harry Potter and the original sets that did design this. This set just screams nostalgia, and that is something that I personally get really, really excited for when I look at this newer set. The ocean color scheme from the original admittedly did have a lot more blue that was incorporated in it, I assume just to represent the water a little bit more rather than like sand and stone and the depths of the lake. Basically, it really, I guess, looks a little bit more like an ocean floor than a lake floor, whereas the newer one does resemble a lake a little bit more by having a sandy yellow base, and you've still got those same blue and green tones, as well as some additional colors this time from Lego's color palette expanding in their later years, which is really nice to see. It also has a lot more greenery than the original set, which is something that personally I really like in the model. And not to mention as well the tiny little addition of the brand new molded Grindylow. It's absolutely adorable, and that is something that was absolutely missing from the original. One major point that I do want to touch on though is the way that Ron and Hermione interact with the set, since the whole purpose of this scene was to have the champions, friends and family floating in the lake in order for Harry, and I guess Victor Crumb as well in the context of this scene, to go and save them. Now in the original, this was done in the form of a very, very fun play feature. There is actually a little notch at the back that you can push down and Ron and Hermione will go flying. I mean, they're not really suspended in the lake in any way, shape or form. They are really embedded into the set's design. But that play feature is very simple and very effective, and I think works really well, and you get that whole scene of them floating to the surface and being set free, which is something that definitely isn't present in the newer model. However, Ron and Hermione actually float in this set, and I think that that is really, really cool. It's not quite a play feature, it's more of a display perk, I guess, which for me as an adult collector is something that I really, really like to see, but also just looks damn cool. I mean, you just literally attach their legs to a stud and then they can bob around in the ocean and float on a chain, and it is really, really well done and something that I absolutely admire. I will gladly sacrifice a play feature for that because I think it looks fantastic. And also you can see down below that there is a yellow crab, which again is a really nice callback to the original. Now as we move up on the newer model, you can see that this is really where the play features lie, with this sprung loaded platform as well as this spinning clock, which I guess technically counts, though it's not really that interesting of a play feature. There's a tiny bit of an interior, and overall, I mean, there's some extra space, but really not that much going on, especially on that sort of base of the actual tower itself. And I'm glad we do have the tower itself, because I think that that is overall a lot more interesting than just having like 3 different sections of the ocean floor. Like in the original, you've got this one piece that sort of sits on its own, and then the rest can twist and fold and open up, and really you can position it kind of how you want. But again, I really like this tall, towering, much more detailed and accurate model that also, I mean, if you really wanted to go the extra mile, you could buy 2 more of these and have all 3 of the towers, whereas I don't really think you can do that and expand on the ocean floor in any way with the original, unless I guess you're just making your own mark. And if you couldn't tell, when it comes to design, minifigures, and just overall, this newer version really, really hits the nail on the head. Now that's not to say that the older one isn't a great set. I think for 2005, this set was leaps and bounds of a lot of other products that were coming out at the time, and for its price point, it was such a great deal. There is a reason that this set has been so highly desired over the last couple of years and finally got its remake. It is a well-deserved remake, and it is a really nice and faithful rendition of the original set, which makes me really, really happy to see. Given the price of the original, it is definitely not worth picking up unless you were a really die-hard Harry Potter fan, or you're buying it for nostalgia for some reason, or you're just trying to collect everything. Spending that amount of money on a set this small really is not worth it, especially now that you have a still relatively cheap and small remade version, which is leaps and leaps and bounds ahead of what they did in 2005. I mean, again, that just happens with Lego, with all the new pieces and all the new talent that they've got on their teams. I am really, really glad that this set existed. But if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts on both of these sets, I did make reviews for each of them, and I will leave them linked on the end screen down below. But let me know what you guys think about this set. It is not often that we get Lego Harry Potter remakes this closely to one another. I often feel that things either change quite often, or they're just tackling so many new concepts, especially when it comes to the Deathly Hallows, that we don't really get stuff like this. So I found it really interesting to take a look at these sets side by side. And often when I was building this set, I kept thinking back to the original and making mental notes of all the comparisons and similarities in my head, which was really, really fun. And again, a really nice callback to the original line of Lego Harry Potter sets. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel down below. And be sure to check out all of my Lego Harry Potter reviews on the end screen now.